Hello, fifth grade civic students, civic citizens, even. It is Friday, October 23rd, and you made it to our civics core lesson. We are going to continue our conversation from, I believe it was on Tuesday, during our last core meeting. I am so glad to see, I can see there are a few kiddos who already are in the chat. Hi, Quincy. Hello, Declan. Hi, Dermot. Glad you are here. Please, if you are able to continue writing in the chat. Anytime I ask a question or am looking for feedback, even if you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat. Hi, Ava. I see you just commented here as well. Ooh, I think I see Bear is also here. I love seeing you guys commenting in the chat. That is absolutely a norm, is when you get here, say hello. We want to acknowledge your presence. And I can see there's about 12 of us here already. Wonderful. So today, you're going to really just need your ears, something to take notes on and with. And the exit question or the exit ticket will be answering our focus question. And really, we're continuing to think about who has had the right to vote throughout history. Specifically, what are the laws and acts and amendments that were passed that gave people the right to vote? You may use the exit ticket from last week if that is helpful in the way that it's organized. We are not going to be doing a visual thinking strategy today, but we are going to be talking about some important dates. The first thing that I would like for us to do is, if you have a piece of paper for notes, go ahead and write the date at the top right corner. It is October 23rd, 2020. You can title this Voting Rights History. Okay, so voting rights history, we're going to continue our conversation about voting rights history since, when we became independent from the British back in 1776 to current day. And really, I wanted to introduce a term alongside voting rights. So we often talk about voting rights, and rights are things that are given to citizens within a political government or a form of government. Now, within our history of our having the right to vote, there is also a history of people not giving out the right to vote. This is called suppression. Say this word with me. Suppression. Now, when voter suppression happens, this is something that we're going to continue to talk about. Well, voting suppression is a term that is indicating or telling us that that other people are almost like pressing down, not allowing other groups of people to vote. So take a minute to think to yourself of the past things that we've discussed. Consider the dates of when people were allowed to vote. And even maybe if someone wants to write in the chat, who was allowed to vote originally? And by originally, I mean back when that Declaration of Independence was formed, and then in 1787 when we signed our Constitution. Who was allowed to vote? Who wasn't given the right to vote? Now, once again, the title is Voting Rights History in America. You can leave off the America, but we are focusing on America, although we're not the only country in the world that's a democracy, right? That's worth saying. So just a reminder, you can say hello. And we're using the chat not for spamming, but for asking questions, for clarifying, and just to say hello. So welcome. I can see there's a few of us here again. The focus question is, Who has had the right to vote throughout history? Who has had the right to vote throughout history? Once again, who has had the right to vote throughout history? So I love that Ava asked to clarify what that focus question is, because that is worthy of writing down. You are going to be answering this question. Who has had the right to vote throughout history? Now, of course, the who has changed throughout history. We've learned that through certain, sure, that is perfect. Yep, voting right history, or voting rights throughout history. So today, we're going to do a little bit of, we're going to have a kind of a conversation. More so, I'm going to be having a conversation with myself. You guys are going to be here, and this is why using the chat is going to be really important. Now, we have looked at a few different slideshows with different dates and titles of acts and amendments that have given people the right to vote throughout history. Okay, I want to frame this in the fact that we have a general election coming up. Yes, a general election between two candidates. One from the Republican corner, we have Donald Trump, and the other candidate we have in the Democratic corner, and we have Joe Biden. Now, many of us, you can chime in the chat, might have known that there was a debate last night. And debates are a new thing in our in America's voting history. Debates started when, I would say, when when television first became a thing. And yes, can you imagine the time before you were born when television was not even invented yet? Well, debates started happening because people wanted to see the candidates talk and see if candidates could communicate clearly, share their ideas about certain policies, and really convince voters that they should vote for them. And a debate is really a great way for all people, citizens, voters and non-voters alike, to really get a sense of what this candidate is offering to the American people. Okay? Now, once again, 11 days until the general election. We did some review. There are two ways in which you vote. I'm going to give bonus points to those people in the chat if you are able to pop up and say, I know how you cast your vote. You do it with a blank and a blank blank, right? So this is a special word. Consider, look back in your mind. How do people cast their vote? Why is it important for people to cast their vote? Okay, these are like big things that we are talking about in 5th grade. There we go. Shout out to Dermot. You have a mail-in absentee ballot and a in-person ballot. So say it with me. Absentee ballot, in-person ballot. So this is how we vote. Now, we know that there's general election, and this is when really it's not just the president that we're voting for the vice president. We're voting for different Congress members. We're voting for local measures and other statewide measures as well. There we go. Shout out. Excellent. Shout out to Quincy. Ava's asking if I can share my notes on the whiteboard because that's how you learn better. I hear that. So let's go to my note-taking screen, and I will pull up our I will pull up the slide deck. So give me a second. In the meantime, this is a great way for you to double check your notes and make sure you've got everything with you. Okay. So another quick reminder. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okie dokie. I am going to share my screen. Let's see here. This one? Nope, not that one. Here we go. Okay, so this is our civics lesson again. You should be able to see that we participate within democracy by voting, right? And here we have democracy outlined as a system of government by the whole population. Keyword, all eligible members, because this is where we're going to talk about voter suppression and how this really has to do with all eligible members. Well, some members really are not able to participate because of voter suppression. And we will talk about what exactly voter suppression is. Now, the big piece that I want us to focus on is that citizens vote in these two different ways. There are ballots and absentee ballots. Now, in order for a person to vote, they have to complete a ballot correctly. Now, there are very important directions that people follow. And so in the general election, this is what we talk about. General elections happen once every 4 years. Say that with me. General elections happen once every 4 years. Now, midterms are exactly what it sounds like. They are in the middle of that 4-year block. So midterms happen not 2 years, every year. So we have votes, not just in general elections, where there is always elections going on, where we are making sure that we are electing officials and Congress people who are representative of our values. And when I say our, I mean those of us who live here in America and who have a voice. And everyone who has a voice should be able to voice their concerns, right? And share what they believe. Absentee ballots are, we covered that, typically this is for citizens who are not able to get into a poll place. So this might be a college student, this might be military personnel who are outside of the country. This might be for people who are disabled. This might be for people who are immune compromised and are not able to leave the house right now because of COVID. And really, many states are sending absentee ballots because they don't want to put people in a situation where they're putting themselves at risk. So really, a lot of people are casting their ballots by mail, which the accurate term for it is an absentee ballot. So many of us might know of our families and how they're voting. So part of your, exit ticket for today is asking your parents, are you voting in person or are you voting absentee by mail? It's another great question to ask the adults in your life. Now, the next piece of this is that, yes, typically we are voting for a Democrat or a Republican. Now, of course, there are other parties other than just these two things, but the majority of voters tend to fall in these two categories. Now, there are categories like independent, the Green Party, there is the People's Party, and a few other parties that don't quite have values that align with either one of these candidates, okay? Now, we've gone over who often is, what values Democrats have versus the values that Republicans have, okay? So really there's, in these voting realms, right, we know that that people cast votes, that people either will vote for Democrat or Republican, and that there are some people who will not vote. And this is where I want to continue bringing up this idea of voter suppression, because when voting suppression happens, you know, we have to ask ourselves, well, within our history, who has had the right to vote? Okay. Now, if we know that throughout history, and let's go back to, you know, the slides from when we, here we go. So when we first started talking, well, in 1776, this is when the Declaration of Independence was signed. Well, who was the only people who were allowed to vote? Only people who owned private property, who were white, who were male, and who were over the age of 21, okay? Now, I know this might sound shocking, but it wasn't until 1856. And in fact, I'm going to squeeze in another slide here. It wasn't until 1856 when all white men, and actually we don't need to capitalize, all white men were allowed to vote. And this is because Virginia was the last state, because remember, our federal government only has given the power to change who gets to vote in the hands of the states. So the whole government, right, from our executive branch has handed off to the responsibility of giving people the right to vote to the states. So in 1856, North Carolina was the last state to remove property ownership as a must for voters. So that means that if you were a white person who didn't own property, you weren't allowed to vote until when? 1856. Okay, now, we are going to continue this conversation. This isn't just a one-time thing, right? Now, we know that we want a system, a democratic system, that offers equal representation. Well, has equal representation happened throughout history? That's how we are going to end our lesson for today, because you have Makerspace. So, consider, ask your adults in your life, are you voting by mail or are you voting in person? You're also going to answer the question, have all people had the right to vote? Or how has the right to vote changed throughout history? Okay, so that's it. Take care. I will see you after Makerspace for support with writing if you're in writing group C, or if you just need some support in general, come to writing. Otherwise, I'll see you during closing at 2:30. Farewell, kiddos.